Welcome to Podnutz Daily for July 1st, 2008. Computer came in today, was a laptop. I got a couple tips for laptops today. Actually, a person called me on the phone, said every time that she turns her computer on, her laptop, she's got a Dell laptop, every time she turns her computer on, it stops running after like 10, 15 minutes, and it gets worse in the hot weather, she said. So we all know what that means. Hopefully, that means computer's overheating. And happens a lot on older Dells. I'm talking like Pentium 4 Dells that really run really hot, so the fans are extra large and they suck in a lot of air. And what happens is it's kind of hard to tell sometimes. The spot between the fan that's cooling the processor and the heat sink. No, not the heat sink. The vent that's going out to the outside of the computer. A wall of dust builds up between the fan and that vent, and you can't see it really from looking at the outside of the computer because it's on the inside of the vent. Well, a lot of times that gets clogged with a wall of dust. There's not proper airflow, and the computer will shut down. One way to check if that's happening, and it's pretty common, if you take a flashlight, there's usually a vent on the bottom of the computer where you can see the fan blades, where you can see the actual fan, and you can see if it's spinning or not. Then if you look on the side of a laptop, there's those slits usually on one side or the back of the laptop where you see like the end of the heat sink and where it kind of splits up so that the fan blows, it runs along the heat sink and cools the heat sink down, and basically blows hot air out of the side of the computer. Well, if you take a flashlight and point it, or a small light or any kind of light, and point it up the vent on the bottom side of the laptop, you should be able to see the light through the vent on the side. If you can't see that light, then you know there's a blockage. Same thing the other way around. It's hard to do it this way, but you can point a light through the vent on the side of the laptop and look through the bottom and see if you see the light shining on the fan. But the best way to do it is take a light, shoot it through the bottom of the laptop, through the grid where the fan is, where you see a fan, and then look in the side of the laptop to see if you see the light. If you don't see the light, that means there's a huge blockage, and compressed air might not do the trick. In fact, it might make it worse. Say you have a huge blockage of dust and just grime or whatever blocking that vent, and you take compressed air and you blast it through the side of the computer, it might just take the chunks that are there and cause it to stick the fan blades. The fan might get stuck because there's no easy spot for that dust to come out of because the laptop's pretty sealed up. So be careful if you have a huge blockage and you spray compressed air, you might cause the fan to stop. If you know you have a huge blockage, just take the laptop apart and you'll take the dust out manually. You'll be surprised how huge it's caked up in there. And if you ever use the compressed air, you wouldn't be able to get that dust out anyway. The only other way to do it is if you don't want to take the laptop apart, blow the compressed air in the side there, and then take a vacuum, like a wet dry vac, and try to suck the chunks of dust in there out through the bottom where the fan is. Okay. Next computer I want to talk about is a Sony VAIO. Person came in, said that his screen's not broken, but when he turns it on, he can see the icons on the screen, but he can't see, there's no backlight, there's no light, but he can see faint images of the icons on the screen, and he knows the screen's working, but it looks like just appears that the light burned out. And that's the appearance. When you have a computer, there's two things that could be bad in this situation. Either the bulb that lights the fluorescent, or lights the screen, burned out, and even though you could still see the graphics on the screen, there's no actual light. Or the inverter board, which is the circuit board that powers the bulb, that went bad. It could be either or. If it's the bulb, then you could either buy a replacement bulb on eBay for $10 and have a hell of a time trying to get it into the screen, because those bulbs are not supposed to be taken out of those screens. I've done a couple of these repairs. I stopped doing them because it's just too difficult, where you actually have to get the bulb out the bottom of the fluorescent, or the bottom of the screen. It's just a fluorescent bulb, and then you take a new bulb, you got to solder it onto the wires and put it back on the screen. Now these bulbs are I would say is about as thin as a small gauge of wire, and they're really long. So if you just touch them the wrong way, they break. And then to top that, you have to solder leads on each end of it. It's just almost impossible. It never comes out exactly right as well. If you can do it, you can make a lot of money because you can charge the customer for a new screen or a laptop repair or a screen repair, maybe a $150 job, and you only spend $10 for the parts. But it's too hard that I even stop doing it. If it's a bulb, I just buy a new screen. If it's the inverter board, then it's another story. The inverter board is very easy to replace. You just take off the front cover of the screen, and the inverter board is always sitting at the bottom under the screen in the actual screen casing. And when they burn out, there's no real indication of anything burned or any circuits that are blown. So you could replace the inverter board, and then you have a working screen, and that's an easy fix. The question is, and this was my dilemma, is how do you know? How do you know if it's the inverter or the bulb? Because both problems have the same exact symptoms, which means the screen is dark, the bulb is out. So how do you know if it's the bulb or the inverter? Well, what I've been doing lately to test this out is I'll take an old screen, an old cracked screen that I've replaced out of a customer's computer, a broken screen that I know has a good bulb. And I'll plug that screen into the inverter, and if the inverter lights the broken screen with the good bulb, then you know that it's not the inverter that's the problem, it's the bulb in the laptop. Or if you have a spare bulb laying around with 2 leads on it, you could use that to test. But you need to have a way to test whether it's the inverter or the bulb, and that's how I do it, because you don't want to buy both, because if you have to buy a new screen, that's a lot of money. You just want to make sure you know what part you need to get, and that's how I do it. Another thing that I did today was what I talked about yesterday. I fixed a power cord for a laptop with one of those Adaptaplugs that we got at Radio Shack. The only question when you're doing this is what Adaptaplug do you actually buy to do the replacement? See, the Adaptaplugs come in letters. There's K, M, N, O. I think there's even L. A couple of those, and they're all pretty common for the size of laptop adapters or laptop tips on the AC adapter. A great way to find out which one you need is you find the model of the laptop you're trying to get a power adapter for, or the tip for. Like this was a Toshiba A105, for example. So I just go into eBay or Google and I go Toshiba A105 AC adapter. And then a whole list of stores or listings come up that are selling that actual AC adapter. In one of those listings, they'll tell you the outer and inner diameter of the tip, usually every time. Usually every time there's at least one in the bunch that tells you that.